Hello. Today I'll be showing you how to use the Breakpoint Debugger in IntelliJ. Now the Breakpoint Debugger is an incredibly powerful tool because it actually lets you compare what your code is doing to what you imagine that your code should do. It's very powerful in that it lets your code run in a way that you can see it run, line by line, and you can actually watch the variables all change and interact with each other in real time. You can see the values of all your different variables. You can watch what changes and what doesn't. You can track down things like null pointer exceptions and even see where exactly they come up from. You can trace them back to their origins rather than putting a bunch of print lines in desperation, hoping to find where they are. It's a much faster, much more efficient, and much better debugging tool than using print lines or trying to guess manually where your errors probably are. And first, to get started with it, I'll be showing you the user interface using this very simple example project. It's just a few lines of code, and our goal here is to figure out how I'm turning this into, well, the output we're going to get. So first thing, let's watch it run and let's see what happens. If I just run this normally, it's going to print the word debugging. But how is it actually getting the debugging from this? Well, it's saying system out print line, get what we're doing. Okay, and this method somehow converts this strange word using some strange mathematical function into the word debugging. No clue what's going on here. Let's try it out. So I'm going to remove the comments from my print lines, and we can watch it run like this, the old-fashioned way, probably how a lot of you have been doing it so far with your assignments. We want it, run it, and we see that the string starts off with this nonsense. Then it's saying that with an offset of -38, this becomes a D, this becomes an E, and whatever, so it must be offsetting the char value. But there's actually a better way to do this, because writing out these print lines takes a lot of time, and we actually have to modify our code. So what if there was a way to get access to this information without ever having these print lines in our way? Well, actually there is, and it all comes down to something called breakpoints. Now in IntelliJ IDEA, if you click on the side of your line, next to the line number, it's going to put this red dot. And it might look scary because your code is all turning red, but what it's actually doing is it's telling the debugger, it's telling the JDK when it's in the debugger mode, to pause execution at that point and show you the value of all your different variables. To demonstrate, I'm going to put it into this for loop. And to show you how, what order your things run in, I'm also going to put one on the print line. So what's going to happen when I click the bug icon at the top, this is to run with the debugger, is it's going to pause on those lines. And it's going to do nothing differently if I press play. So when I run the code normally and with the play button, it does nothing. But when I click the bug button, with these breakpoints here, it's actually going to pause the program at every line with a red dot on it. So here it's paused it on this system out print line. And notice the system out print line still hasn't run. It needs to call this method. And it's telling me that the value of args in string args is blank. So now if I click this little forward icon, it's going to move forward. It's going to keep running the program until it gets to the next breakpoint. So I click next, and it runs all this stuff. It assigns this char array and everything. And it hits this breakpoint at the top of the for loop. It's now telling me the values of all my different variables. So if I hover over, let's say, word, it knows that word is a char array of length 9. And you go into that, and then you can actually see every character in word and what they're valued to. If I see here my variables, I can see the same thing. And these are the different views of the debugger. Sometimes your debugger shows you information in line with your code in IntelliJ. It'll show you what the values of your variables are in line, so that means next to where the code is in this gray. And it'll also sometimes show you things like where there's a null pointer exception. It'll give you a warning that line has a null pointer exception, stuff like that. Or any other kind of exception. I just say null pointer because it's the most common. So this is where it's shown in line. Additionally, here you have a variable screen where you see the value of all the different variables that are established in your code. Now this will update over time as you run, and it'll include all the different variables that exist in the scope of where the breakpoint is. By that I mean any variable that's accessible from this part of the code will be displayed in your list of variables here. And that also includes any variable you can hover over to see the value of. So here I can hover over word to see its value, and it's also represented here. And then here we got frames, which is how we control how our code runs. This is where we're able to click the resume button and watch it increment. And here you see I appears because I has been created. And we can see what it evaluates to. We've paused on this line. Now what happens when you pause is it actually doesn't evaluate the line until you click next. It pauses at the start of this line. And that lets you see the whole environment, the whole context that this line is being called in. Now it's useful because the context is what tells you, for instance here on null pointer exception, which variable is null. If you put a breakpoint on the line that causes a null pointer exception, you can look through all the variables in your code and see what variable is null to give you that null pointer exception. It's very helpful. But here nothing is null, it's all going to work, and we click next and we can see that this evaluates a -38, so once we get to the next line, the previous line gets evaluated. And here we can actually see, okay, so word is this array, I is 0, offset is -38, word I is, well, I is 0, word I will be the first element of word. That will be this character, which has a Unicode value of 138. That one plus -38 is going to get the Unicode value 100. And we can see that because now in orange it highlights the new value of that character we just changed. And we can see here that word I is going to be D with a Unicode value of 100, exactly as we predicted. And now as we go through and we run it, it very nicely, in a very aesthetically pleasing fashion, shows us that the variable that we just changed is E. It's got its like little orange colored highlight on it because it just changed. We go through and we can see as it very nicely changes the value of our array here to say the word debugging using this little offset. So somehow this mathematical function here creates an offset such that that nonsense turns into the word debugging. It's a bit of like an encryption thing here. Now it goes through and it runs and we print out debugging. And that's a really simple example of the Breakpoint Debugger. Now we can go into something a bit more complicated. Hey here, has this ever happened to you?